Two-wheeler sales, an important economic indicator, is yet to reach pre-COVID numbers. It is a sign of tepid consumer sentiments in rural India, which is a major market for two-wheeler makers. According to numbers released by Federation of Automobile Dealers Association, sales of two-wheelers have been adversely affected by inflationary pressures and stress on rural economy. But at a time when car sales have peaked, what are the reasons behind lag in two-wheeler sales? We will discuss all of that and more. Saurabh Uboweja is going to join us very, very shortly. My colleague Kartik is here with me. Kartik, two-wheeler sales, they're not looking very good. What does it tell us about the rural economy?
No, so, we have to look at this data in perspective, Shweta, and there are multiple reports that have been released. Now, have we seen a real contraction in two-wheeler sales? We have not, fortunately. What seems to be noticed and observed is the fact that we haven't reached the pre-COVID levels when it comes to sales of two-wheelers. Now, we understand auto is an important sector and the health of the economy is reflected in the auto sector. So, if you're looking at four-wheelers, it talks well about urban India and the upwardly mobile India, whereas when you look at two-wheelers, it talks to us about the health of the rural economy. Now, on an average, numbers have been growing. We have seen the numbers on a Y-on-Y, year-on-year, as well as on a month-on-month basis on the data that came out in March. We've seen a growth. I think the challenge right now is that these numbers still don't reflect the numbers that we had achieved in the pre-COVID era. Now, is that a fair benchmark or not is something that, that one again has to look at in another context altogether. Now, the point being, we are seeing there is inflation for one, right? Number two, we are seeing that loans have become expensive. So, while the cost of the product all across, not just automobiles, every industry, every product has been hit by inflation. At the same time, loans have also become expensive because of the rate hike that RBI has been doing consistently. So, what is really, helping the growth not reach its pre-COVID levels is not as much about rural demand per se, but demand at the price at which the asset gets acquired. So, I think the larger problem is that rural economy has perhaps not grown at the same clip as the rest of the country. And we saw the World Bank data that came yesterday as well.
Absolutely.
So, we are saying we are going to continue to grow at 6.3% versus 6.6%. Asian Development Bank, on the other hand, said 6.4%, so minus 0.1% there. But the fact is there is growth, and that calls for reason to celebrate and believe that we are on the right path.
Okay.
Now, should we really look at it at a pre-COVID level? We saw the recovery was also sharp, and during COVID, the rural sector was obviously far more hit than the urban sector. So maybe they are holding on to cash. We also know for a fact that monsoons are likely to be a problem this year, right? There's unseasonal rain. There are chances of the El Nino. So maybe the rural folks are holding on to their cash, but this doesn't really reflect as much in other indices. Even if you look at PMI, what you and Suyash were talking about earlier, if you look at PMI, there is overall growth. It is 57% for services, 57 points for services, and about 58 points for services and manufacturing put together. So overall, correct. We don't seem to be in a bad position.
Okay. Saurabh is joining us. Saurabh, we're not in a bad position. That is the assessment here. But, coming back to the sales of two-wheeler, automobiles in general are doing well. Passenger vehicles are doing well. SUVs are selling like hotcakes. But there's not much demand for two-wheelers just as yet. Although there is a moderate expansion, we're not seeing the pre-COVID levels just as yet. What do you make of these numbers?
Yeah, great. You're right, Shweta. And at the same time, if you see just the performance in the last financial year has actually already seen a double-digit rebound. What we do foresee is a concern in the coming year. I think that's what we got to be worried about, because usually there is a lagging effect of any kind of inflationary pressure. We already can see that even with the four-wheelers, not just two-wheelers, almost all the brands are sort of, re-rating their expectations as far as their growth in this financial year is concerned. And that's something that you could expect in the next 2 quarters to show up as a much more serious concern. So the rebound already happened very quickly, if I were to summarize. but we may be, looking forward to another significant dip, in the next couple of quarters.
Okay. The regulatory compliances seems to be also one of the major reasons uh, due to which two-wheeler prices are rising. We know that two-wheeler prices are on the rise. What are the ways in which industry can counter this impact? Because all in all, it's just not about people not buying. It's also about the rising prices of two-wheelers at large.
That's right. And so for any industry, two-wheelers in particular in this case, the way to counter the impact of rise in prices, whether it's because of better emission controls or because of inflationary pressures or the monsoon, but the fundamental here is that are we creating better products? And what you do see, brands working towards is, a significant improvement in the technology space. So they're, for example, the anti-braking systems or the slippery clutch technology. All of these things are now becoming dominant features of the products which are getting launched in the market. The other big trend, of course, when it comes to two-wheelers, which we cannot ignore any longer, is the EV two-wheelers, which is becoming very important. But if one was to run and even though it's growing at a very, very high rate at the moment, but the base is small, but if one was to run a short survey of potential buyers, uh, a lot of two-wheeler buyers still do not trust the EV two-wheeler ecosystem. So I think there's pressure on brands to innovate on that front, both in terms of marketing as well as product improvements, and that for sure is going to have a positive impact on the top line, even though it might impact the bottom lines in the short term because of these incremental expenditures, both capital and operating.
Saurabh, help us understand, would it be fair to classify EV scooters also in the same category as the rest of the two-wheelers when we talk about the health of the rural economy? Do you think the uptick in EV scooters, EV two-wheelers will happen as much in rural as it is likely to happen in urban?
Not really. I don't expect that to happen. A simple reason being that the quality and the consistency of electricity in the rural markets is still not at the level that we'd expect it to be. In fact, there's still a lot of urban markets where you don't always have consistent electricity supply, even though the situation has improved dramatically over the last couple of years. So the EV market would first take off in the urban markets. We're still about less than 5% of the total two-wheeler market as far as EVs is concerned. So expect it to go from super urban to semi-urban before it really goes to the rural. So still a couple of years away before rural really picks up EV as a preferred choice.
Right. So we also saw FADA release some data yesterday, Saurabh, and it categorically stated that passenger vehicles are likely to see a 14% fillip in this financial year. At the same time, two-wheelers are likely to grow by about 12%. Right now, we are just about 16% behind our pre-COVID levels. So a 12% addition this year, of course, will take us closer to that mark. Not that it's a benchmark, but I think when we talk about air traffic or whether we talk about consumption per se, COVID becomes this sort of differentiator pre-COVID and post-COVID. But coming back to the point, so we are looking at passenger vehicles to grow at about 14%, two-wheelers by about 12%, commercial vehicles by about 10%. Do you think some of this offtake of four-wheelers is also eating into the reduction in two-wheeler sales in rural? Do you see that as a trend emerging, that erstwhile two-wheeler or prospective two-wheeler buyers are actually upgrading to four-wheelers like we saw for the rest of the country during COVID? Public transport was ditched to get a hands on a car.
Not really, I would say.
Okay.
The matter of the fact is that if the two-wheelers are becoming expensive, but so are the four-wheelers. And so therefore the gap continues to increase between what a customer can really afford, between a two and a four-wheeler. And therefore, I don't think that that's one of the major reasons. It might be a small contributor, but certainly not a significant reason why, you'd expect a slowdown in the two-wheeler sales.
Okay, and how do you see this whole OPEC cutting down on oil production? Estimates suggesting that oil could very well reach $88 to $90 per barrel. Some reports also suggesting end of the year we could see it go up to $100 per barrel. So overall, do you think once this translates to increasing fuel prices, for the retail consumer. Do you think that could have some sort of a slowdown impact on the auto sector per se?
May not really, I would say, again, for the simple reason that for a lot of Indian consumers, when they look to purchase a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, there is a fair amount of aspirational value associated with it. And I don't think customers really calculate at that level of detailing whether the oil price is going up or low. Also because oil prices are not something that's going to stay stagnant for a long time. So and nobody can really predict which way it heads. So my thought here is that it's more an issue of the purchasing power of a customer, and everything has got a lot more expensive than it was maybe about a year ago. And if, for example, I'm a potential two-wheeler customer and I've just invested into maybe buying a home, which I also needed to, and taken a loan for that. And unless and only I can, for example, pay back that loan, I'm not willing to take a new loan to buy a two-wheeler. I don't think people have enough cash, and that's one of the big reasons why there's a likely dip. And the fact that the cost of the loans have really shot up significantly.
Right. So, sort of, what do you read into, let's say, what the World Bank also mentioned yesterday? The report released by the World Bank yesterday stated that this slight moderation in India's growth at 6.3% is actually going to be on the back of reduced consumption, which is on the back of reduced incomes. So, with inflation going up, income reducing, do you think inflation is going to continue to stick? And of course, we have the MPC underway right now, and the next decision on rate hike is likely to come tomorrow. But if at all a rate hike or it stays as is, we'll discover only tomorrow. But overall, this sort of double-edged sword of inflation increasing, sticking on, if not increasing drastically, while income reducing.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, and almost every industry at the moment is facing that sword. And the impact of that will, again, like I mentioned, is a lagging impact.
Yeah.
So it's going to last for at least 2 quarters before we really see any new trend emerging. And people are postponing their purchase decisions as much as they can, given that they don't have surplus cash with them. There is obviously a lot of news coming from the tech sectors, the startup sectors, where funding has dried up. And for that matter, there are job cuts across the board. Not that it impacts the immediate larger economy in India, because it's still a very small proportion of the job cuts, which would create an impact, but it does create a sentiment issue. And when that usually happens, you can expect that some of the more significant discretionary purchases would get postponed, till you again start to feel comfortable with the amount of cash in the bank.
Right. And how do you see this whole supply chain issue panning out? I believe there is obviously, some ease in the electronic components, especially the semiconductors, but it still doesn't seem to be enough. So overall, how guarded are we on the production side to really thwart away these challenges which we are faced with externally?
I think at least for the last 6 months, the automotive companies have actually enjoyed a great joyride, if I may say so. And they've managed to create a huge pipe of potential customers, even though the semiconductor shortage continues to be a pressing issue. What they're also now worried about is that the demand is actually going to stabilize a lot more. So in a way, it would match up to the availability of semiconductors. So that lag that we saw, for some of the four-wheeler models, sometimes the waiting period of over 6 months, that might come down to about 2 to 3 months, and which basically means that the supply and demand would sort of stabilize to a fairly acceptable level.
Okay. So coming back to the sales as far as, auto sales is concerned, we've seen four-wheeler sales getting better than pre-COVID levels at all-time highs, passenger vehicles, SUVs. Whereas, when it comes to two-wheelers, we're seeing a dip, not so much as a dip, but not enough, not there yet as far as pre-COVID sales is concerned. What does it tell us about sort of income disparity in the country? Are these telltale signs of, rich getting richer and perhaps the middle class or the lower middle class not earning enough? Because there's no pent-up demand in case of two-wheelers here.
Yeah, that's right. So partly yes, but at the same time, what usually happens in the the Western markets where the disparity is a lot more higher. In India, there are multiple levels, so it's not really a rich and poor. There could be almost as many as 8 or 9 levels between the rich and poor. So I don't think that we could simply generalize it. At the same time, what we've noticed is that 1% of the super rich, have continued to sort of grow their wealth, but that also has seen actually a bit of a dip in the last couple of months. If you really see the performance of Sensex, which really is a reflection of that 1% of the rich promoters and founders, it's not really grown. It's not something that you could really see as a significant growth zone. So there is downward pressure on all sides. Not that it impacts their ability to make any significant purchases at the luxury level. So that market continues to grow really amazingly well. But yes, what you do see is that the willingness to pay higher increments to the larger employee base is gone down. The willingness to hire more people has gone down. So one of the biggest recruiters in the Indian economy is the IT services companies. They've had a significant downward pressure because of their order books, sort of depleting a little bit because of the global recession, and especially in the western parts of the market. So you for sure would expect that the cash in hand is going to go down. Real estate has become very expensive. If you're looking to even rent a space, if you can't buy, it's sort of gone out of a normal person's ability, to be able to afford, especially when you have the uncertainty of job cuts, on your head. So what you see here is maybe a short-term trend where people are likely to become more conservative as far as spending is concerned. But one can expect that the India story is still intact. We do have significant investments happening across sectors, and so there is hope. There is a lot of optimism alongside. But we have to wait and watch the next 2 quarters at least, which could be a bit painful for most sectors.